Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal. You know, when you read something and it hits so deep, you feel like someone just cracked open your own diary? Well, that's exactly how I felt when I read Emily Gangel's blog post, Love is a Battlefield. In it, she described what it's like to live in a relationship wearing an emotional bomb suit. And I knew right away I had to talk to her. Now, Emily isn't a therapist or a coach. She's a stay-at-home mom and a writer who's been quietly unpacking the emotional landmines of marriage, motherhood, and trauma through her own healing journey. What she shares in this episode, it's raw, it's honest, and it's exactly the kind of conversation that we need to be having. We talk about everything from emotional flashbacks to silent suffering, to raising boys in a home shaped by trauma, and the moment she realized her silence was teaching her child to shrink. And the most powerful part, what happened when she finally took the bomb suit off. So if you've ever thought, I've read all the books and nothing is changing, this episode is for you. And if you stick to the end, you'll hear what Emily says to her son in the final moments, and it will absolutely wreck you. So let's get started with this interview. Out to me, and I was able to read one of her articles where she was so raw and honest about her relationship. And I just knew that I needed to have her on the show because we would be able to have a very interesting and helpful conversation for other women who are in the same boat. Would you mind just giving us a little summary of the article you wrote and why?
Sure. It was about wearing a bomb suit, being in a relationship and what it's like being like an emotional bomb diffuser within the marriage. So sort of like tiptoeing around and, and just the emotional weight that really carries and what it means with raising kids and just sort of how that plays out and how it's no life to live, just the weight of that suit that you carry. Yeah.
So are you a writer?
I'd say like a hobby writer, I guess. Like I'm just a stay-at-home mum and writing is my hobby. So I've just had a blog for who knows how long, maybe about 10 years. But yeah, just sort of started there. And that's really where it all started for me, was like just unpacking some emotional trauma of my own. And it all just sort of really snowballed from there, getting into like my marriage and relationship and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Well, your writing is amazing. So
thank you so much. Yeah.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really kind.
Well, why don't you just tell me a little bit about your relationship? Like start at the beginning. Where did you meet?
Start at the beginning. We met in Cambodia, of all places. I was backpacking on one of my impromptu just runaway trips, like as a mid-20 something. And we met and we did long distance for a little bit. It was really super romantic. All of the sort of cliche things for this sort of relationship in the beginning, like everything's perfect and just lovely, super handsome guy. I continued traveling and he went back home to the Netherlands, but we were just nonstop talking, apping. So eventually, he ended up coming to Australia to visit for a bit. I was living in an apartment in town. I was working in event management and he came to visit, stayed for 2 weeks. It was lovely. Still in contact constantly. He was sending me parcels all the time. And yeah, it was just like nonstop,
Okay.
And so by maybe like 5 or 6 months later, he came to Australia and stayed for 3 months with me. So he took time off work. And then it was then we decided, like, okay, it's not really financially, sustainable. I should have mentioned, yeah, he's from the Netherlands. I'm from Australia.
Okay.
Complete
Okay.
other side of the world also.
Uh-huh.
But you
Uh-huh.
couldn't get further away. Um, so yeah, with long distance, you have to kind of have those discussions early, like, where is
Uh-huh.
this going? What are we going to do? It's not something that can just be like, well, we'll just wait and see, because it's like as soon as the, one trip's ending, you're thinking about already who's coming where, and it's very expensive. But so on that second trip that he came to Australia, we decided that I would go live in the Netherlands, which again is a total dream. He lived on a houseboat. And what girl isn't going to be like, absolutely, like this is perfect, dream life.
Uh-huh.
So ended up going, sold all my stuff. He came to Australia. We did a massive travel around Australia in a camper van, which was really fun. And then flew back over to the Netherlands, and it was within, I think, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I was pregnant with my firstborn. Yeah. So
Oh my God.
things went very fast, and it was almost immediately with the pregnancy that, like, those red flags that I was like, it'll be fine once I just get there, like once I just get to once we're back in his space and everything, like everything will be all good. That voice that you keep telling yourself, that sort of thing, like it'll be okay. And so yeah, the pregnancy started, and then yeah, how do you say, like all the red flags sort of became evident, and I realized, like, I'd gotten myself into like a situation that this time, like, once you're pregnant and you have kids, you think like, oh, this isn't, now there's, another aspect, another layer to this. There's another life to this. This isn't something that I can just sort of run away from.
Can
The
you talk just
pregnancy,
briefly about what some of those red flags were that you were noticing?
yeah, aggression. Like, so the arguments that sort of came up, like, it was just totally different, like a very Jekyll and Hyde sort of arguments that were happening. And that moment where you just sort of have like, oh, I've been here before, like I've seen this before. So like in the past, I'd had like other there was definitely a pattern of the men that I'd been with, like either physically abusive or emotionally, mentally abusive. And so like those were the flags that I saw, but just didn't want it to be true, like I just still, even though when you finish that last relationship, you think like, never again, I know the signs, like,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. But then you just sort of, it's like you stroll in there, twirling a cane, like, oh, this is going to be different this time because I think I'm aware this time, But, there really wasn't that much sort of connection between us.
Okay.
And you still just sort of in total survival mode. So with our firstborn, his name's Darwin, it was just sort of, yeah, really sort of straight up survival, like just sort of getting through that. And then by the time the second born came around, which was also 2020, yeah, so he was born in January, and in the Netherlands it wasn't really quite a lockdown, but by about February, they were like, stay home, work from home. And home, like going to work is sort of like when I could take off the bomb suit, so to speak, like, so I was like, and then suddenly couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So that period, so for a couple of years, and then plus with my second born, that really was like the change. Like I say in a lot of my writing, like that was when I went crazy. Like couldn't hide it anymore, like I couldn't keep the facade up. I couldn't I really realized that like something had to change. So I started, yeah, looking into myself and seeing like, yeah, I know what's happening with me. Like this is all survival responses. Like this is
So
all.
what was happening with you? Can you describe that?
I was it might sound strange, but like I was just like totally over myself, like that whole knowing that you're not crazy feeling, like that I knew that I was responding accordingly to a dysfunctional environment. And I think that was the key, because in the beginning you think like, I'm going crazy, we're having the same arguments over and over again over like tiny things, like the constant with like in your post, like if you bring something up, it's like an accusation or something, and you're like, oh gosh, like I just want to go to the garden center today. Like,
So you started
um
to realize that the emotions that were coming your way,
yeah,
that were, you felt like you had to wear a bomb suit for, were coming from somewhere else.
that's right. Yeah, so when I
And
started
where were they
to
coming from? Did you ever,
for
did you figure that out?
on his part,
Yeah.
or well,
Yeah.
I knew when I started reading about trauma and emotional yeah, just like deep traumas, like then of course you're going to look also at your partner and be like, oh, like his dad
Yeah.
passed when he was 19, and he also had like a really angry dad, which was like the stories, he was open
Okay.
to talk about it, and all like was very happy to discuss like what had been going on in his childhood. And so like I'd always I had that in the back of my head. And but it comes to a point where again it's like I say, awareness is nothing without action. So it's like for years it was like, yeah, I've got an angry dad and that's why I am, because the arguments would come, the emotional abuse, the aggression, and then however like he would leave, come back, and everything's like, I'm
Okay.
sorry, or like everything was.
So you knew that part of his background, and
Yes, that's right.
that
Yeah, yeah,
was
that was like what was sort of keeping me like, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing, so to speak. Like I knew that it was a reaction from what was happening from him. And so that's really when I started learning about complex PTSD.
yeah.
And like if that's what was happening for me, and that just that the reactions were different. So I was like a shutdown type of, like I'm the
Okay.
be small, like just don't make a bother. And it's like those two were like drawn together almost, because he's like the explosive one and I'm just the like, let the explosion happen and just get on with what you're doing, and everything will just simmer down. But
When did
yeah,
you
so
realize that you were going to have to start speaking up?
um it actually came when I was with my son at his like a daycare, so well not daycare, but it's like a Pooterspiel, it's sort of like a preschool almost.
Mm.
And classic, like thought I was doing the best job, like that we were so close because I was home with him and he was speaking English and Dutch, but he was really shy. And one of my things was always just being afraid that like he was going to turn into this anger, like inherit this, like this anger. That was my massive focal point that I tried to speak to my husband about, was like, don't pass it on, like when you try to
Yes.
have these discussions, of course. But then yeah, the lady was talking to me about my son Darwin and his behavior. He was only 2.5 or 3 at the time. And she was saying like he is like, he doesn't say anything, kids are just coming up and taking his toys. He needs to learn how to speak up, like he needs to learn how to say something. And I was heartbroken, but it was like a mirror was put in front of me, because I was like, this, it's not his behavior I should be worrying about, it's my behavior. And so he's
Oh,
witnessing the stronger person come in and that you just stay silent. So that was huge. Like just sitting there at the table, I was like, this is
this
massive,
is time. It is
this is
time.
time. It is time. Exactly.
Well, kudos to you
Yeah.
though, because that
Yeah.
really is how these patterns continue,
Exactly.
right?
That's right. Exactly. And I,
Because,
I was witnessing it right there. Yeah.
right, absolutely, that the
Yeah.
patterns continue unless we do something about it.
Exactly. Yeah. So as heartbreaking as it was, you've got to make change. Like it was, it's a blessing in disguise that you can see that and use that as like, that really was like the catalyst of change for me in my life,
What
that it
did
was
you
just
do
like,
from
enough is
there?
enough.
Yeah, what did you do?
Really, really started reading a lot more about it. Anything I could get my hands on, I was reading. I was listening to articles.
And specifically
Yeah,
on like trauma, complex
Co-
trauma.
complex trauma, because I knew that
Okay.
that's what I had had. Um, and I knew that like the patterns that was happening, like that he was also exhibiting those. It was exactly the same. We just had different reactions, like
Yep.
different outputs. So I
They
knew
were
that that's
coping
what it was about. That
mechanisms
were all coping
from your
mechanisms.
childhood. They just,
Exactly.
and then you two were opposites with your
Yeah. Yes, very
coping
much. But
mechanisms.
we were both opposites with our coping mechanisms, but it was just playing out.
Okay.
And I knew that when you really start to unpack like with trauma and everything, you think like, this is like it's a blueprint, like we can use these tools and we can overcome it. Like we don't have to let it run our lives. Like this isn't who we are, like to an absolute, like we can change. And
Yes.
so it came to the point where like I was so sick of myself at the point of being like having this victim mentality also, where it was like, if he wasn't so angry, then I could start healing. Once he gets control of himself, then it'll be a safe space for me to start being able to do this work. And you've got
It's
to get rid of
very
that voice.
easy
Yeah.
to feel out of control,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
that there's
absolutely.
nothing that you can do
Yeah.
if your
Oh,
partner
absolutely.
doesn't
Yeah.
change or doesn't do the work,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. And
And
that's
then all
what
of
it
a
was like.
sudden with your son, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe there are some things I can,
There are some
and
things you
I
can
might
do.
be part of
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
takes two to
Which
tango.
is,
Yeah.
yeah. And it is a massive gut punch, because you think,
Yes.
because with that victim mentality also in your ego, you want to believe that it's somebody else and that it's not you, and that you're doing everything you can to try to protect them from it. But like in the post with the bomb suit, like how I say, like you've got tactical gloves on and you're wearing a suit, like I couldn't get close enough to them. I couldn't hug them the way they needed to be hugged because I'm wearing this protective armor that I think I need to be wearing. And so that's what comes at a real cost, is your connection with your children. And I saw that obviously it was evident with when I was speaking to the teacher at the daycare. So
So did you start working on yourself first then after
100%,
that realization?
because there was no realizing that there's just no getting through to my husband, but also that you can't, like that whole, what's the saying about like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So I was like, also a response for with trauma is like, hey, guess what, we're messed up, here's the evidence. They're going to be explosive about it, like nothing wrong with me. Like I knew that that's how the ego works. Like it's always going to be like, no, 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 stay back, we're totally fine.
Yeah, so
So
once you know what the trauma is, makes them default to what
exactly, yeah,
everybody starts defaulting to,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You can start to figure out why it feels like you're saying one thing and your partner's hearing something completely
something
different.
else, exactly right, yeah. And
And then
something really
you can
good.
kind of change how you phrase things,
That's right. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
To
exactly.
once you know that
Yeah,
underlying mechanism and have more empathy, would you say, and compassion for
absolutely.
why they're
Yeah,
having that, instead of just, because it's
yeah.
hard
It is
when
very
it's
hard.
explosive
When
to
it's
have
explosive, it's
empathy.
very hard. It is very much, because you're like, you also get in that trap where you're like, I'm doing so much work here, and like, yeah, it's really
I'm,
difficult, like the
yes.
anger, the aggression, and you're just like, yeah, like I'm trying to be nice here, like. But when I mean, obviously there'd be a point where, and it did sort of get to a point, like we ended up moving to Australia, which was sort of a make or break decision.
Really? This was
Because
kind of your
towards
last.
the end,
Tell me how you
um,
started to speak out and change your default mode
my default
of
mode, yeah,
just freezing, right? I think that's
freezing,
what you
yeah.
said, freezing
Yeah,
and
freezing. Yeah,
kind of
I
pushing it
was
under
like
the
pushing
rug.
it down. Yeah, and I was just like, yeah, like a
Yeah.
yeah, going
What did you
small
work on?
sort of
Tell me
thing.
what steps you did.
Um, being an example for the kids was like the number one thing, and a lot of it came down to like with the body work, so like trying to feel what was happening in your body, because even though I was like shrinking down, when you're confronted with an aggressor sort of thing, you're naturally your heart rates, my heart was pumping. I could feel my face like getting flushed, like I'm freaking out.
Yeah. So what is
So
the body work? How did that, what helped you realize that this was a physical response?
it's, well, when you realize like it's the physical response, like then your body is all, your mind is then being like, we're
Is
being
gone.
chased by a lion, like
Right.
everything's like going haywire,
It's
like
not rational anymore.
not rational anymore. So I knew
What
that like
body work
step
did you
one,
do? Was there a certain type
tapping.
or
Yeah, I did like tapping.
tapping?
So I did like
You
the
did?
collarbone tapping. Yeah. Which
Okay.
was for me back in the day, the type of person I was also, I was like, cringe. Like, I feel like that sort of reaction's also going to set him off. So I'm like, if he's explosive, I'm like turning around, like, we're safe, like
But they
everything's
weren't. He
yeah,
wasn't though,
no,
was he?
yeah,
Right? You
exactly.
think
Yeah,
so. So
yeah.
much of it is in our head
In
about
our own
what we
heads
think or
is
are
going to
worried or
happen.
fearful
Yeah,
of. And then
that's right.
sometimes when you try them, you're like, oh, he didn't even know.
Yeah, exactly. I just sort of turned around doing the deep breaths, calm myself down, like,
Yeah.
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 So,
Okay. So body
yeah,
work.
yeah, I did a lot of the body work, and then also um trying to find ways that would diffuse it without enabling, so
Yes.
like, yeah, like how you were saying about like using specific phrases, like, so I took um like without escalating the issue, like if the kids were around or something, I would just like, as soon as insults would start coming in, I would say like, I'm no longer engaging in this, like yeah,
How hard
like
was that for you to start doing though?
very, very hard. Yeah, very difficult.
It's
Yeah,
so hard.
it is, yes, because naturally you're in this defense mode, and so just going back to like when you sort of start realizing, I realized like that was spending so much time defending like a version of myself that like he had in his head of me that didn't exist, so it's like I was defending like something imaginary, and that's just so exhausting because you're like, I'm not even like this or doing this or anything. So it's like once all those accusations start coming in, and when you're learning about PTSD also, or complex trauma, like the accusations are also like a confession, so it's like,
Ooh, tell
it's
me more
all
about that. Yes.
like it's a projection. So it's like sort of what, he's telling you clear as day, like sort of more about what's going on inside him with what he's saying to you than what you think it is also about, that you think that he's saying it about you, but it's more of a reflection of what's going inside of him.
That is so true. I love the way
Yeah,
you said that because, and that's where the empathy can come in once
exactly.
you
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah, that's right.
And the responses can change once you realize
100%. Yeah. And I
that.
started seeing
Yeah.
things like how some of the things he would say, rather than take them personally, I just would imagine him as a little kid, and like, that's how your parents spoke to you. Like, I mean, mine wasn't a walk in the park or anything, but like I had absent, both my parents were like emotionally absent, and whereas his were like full on and involved, so to be able to have that empathy, it was like, yeah, I would just try to look at him like a little kid and be like, yeah. So it was
And
more
one of the
heartbreaking, and then you
things
can have the
I
empathy.
realized as well, that it took me a long time to realize that the anger for how he was treated does need to come out.
Yeah,
They've suppressed
and
it
we
so
have to
much, and then
create that
having,
environment.
yes, We
Yes,
do.
yeah.
And when you can do that and be able to allow them to be
Come out of
upset,
there.
just not at
Yeah,
you, but for
exactly.
what really they're angry about,
Yeah,
nobody's done that for them before.
exactly. And that was one of the massive things that I realized. And the only person I had at the time to talk to was like my mum, which love her, but it was like repeated patterns. And so growing up, I used to hear like, why should I be the one having to do this sort of stuff? Like, why do we have to do that? Like the man should be doing all this stuff. But had to like really deprogram myself completely to be able to understand what was happening here. And that was, yeah, one of the big realizations was like, if I can create this space for him to be able to sort of unpack, like it's like he had his own defense sort of suit on, you know what I mean? Like that he was reactive and everything, and no one has ever given him the opportunity to relax and calm down. He's never had that space.
So tell me when you started to say those things in the moment, because it's so important what you said. At least it worked for me and it works for my clients as well. Is when
Yeah,
you were saying the moment that words start to come out is when you want to say something to diffuse it in the moment. Banging your head against the wall, trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work. Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together. Started to say those things in the moment because it's so important what you said. At least it worked for me and it works for my clients as well, is when you were saying the moment that words start to come out is when you want to say something to diffuse it in the moment, which essentially means you're going to not engage in it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I was just like, once the things come out, be like, I'm not engaging. Like, you need to recognize like this person's disconnected now. And it's
There's
like you're having a conversation with a drunk person,
It
like
is. It's never going to go well.
It's never going to go well. Yeah.
And even though it seems scary to shut it down, essentially you're kind of shutting it down.
Shutting it down. Yeah.
Once you do it and you realize it actually creates more peace, you're like, why didn't I do that sooner? Because everything I was saying was actually
adding fuel to the fire,
adding kerosene to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So you realize how scared you were about doing it, but that actually it helps.
It does help 100%. Just by saying like, I'm not engaging in that. And in the beginning, it was like, there would be, he'll like poke and prod to try to keep it going. But if the kids were around, I'd just be like, I don't find this isn't necessary in front of the kids. Or like something I found also was like the quieter I became, like the clearer he could hear himself. So it's like with me arguing back, it's like you're just in that tennis match, like, I'm not this, you're not that, he's that, you're this, you're
They
that,
never
like,
focused
stop
on
this.
why they were upset in the first
In the
place.
first place, exactly. And so if
Yes.
there's that silence, like that, you can just sort of become
Aware.
aware,
Aware.
he can hear himself speaking, and he can hear himself, the things that he's saying, if I don't react, so it's like my silence then will echo his words back to him, rather than him hearing my reaction to his
And
words,
focusing on that from now
and
on.
focusing on that. Exactly. So, and it's hard, but it's when you have your kids and you have something that you know you don't want to hand down, this trauma, like it was the only
A
thing I could think about.
necessity.
A necessity. It
A
was the only thing.
necessity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Healing since then has this journey has just it's been nonstop, like
So
I
you did
said.
all this work and then
Yeah,
started implementing those things
pretty much. Yeah.
into
So
your relationship. Okay.
into the relationship, and so with the marriage, when we had marriage therapy, it really wasn't, he was sort of more like a mediator, and it sort of showed me, because this was before I started doing my own therapy.
Okay.
I wouldn't say we only, our sessions always went over too, because that was at the beginning of, like, we couldn't hold a conversation, like I couldn't stop it. I mean,
You
I
do
was just
know.
like a bubbly mess. I was just like bawling my eyes out, like, ugh. And I went in there with such a crazy idea, thinking like that, the therapist is going to be like, yeah, Oscar, it's all you. But like in the first session, he's like, Emily, what's going on with you? And I'm like, what do you mean? Don't you hear what he's telling me? Like, expecting him to like roll up a newspaper and be like, Oscar, no, this is not how things are done. But so much of that self, like the first session was like, saying it without saying it, but like, who's forcing you to stay? Like, what? Like, yeah, I can hear the things he's saying, like, they're awful, but what's going on with you that you would stay with that. So that really sort of was the start of that. And but in those sessions with our marriage therapist, it really sort of did give him the first time, like, opportunity, and that's where he would start speaking about his father and sort of like make the connections that these patterns do get handed down, because hearing it from me was like, I didn't
You
want to
didn't
hear
know.
anything from me.
No.
What do I know, sort of thing. So hearing it from another person, obviously, and a professional and a registered therapist, he was like, okay, maybe there is. But still, it takes so much time, like it takes so much work. And after it had been like a year or two, it really sort of, like, when we made the decision to move, because divorce was getting thrown around constantly, and also I knew how much work I was doing to get to the point where I was, and it was like, is he even gonna be able to sort of meet me halfway, so to speak? Is he going to be able to do this kind of work? So yeah, the fights about divorce and everything sort of came up, to the point where I was just like, let's discuss this. Like, I was at a point where I was like, okay, like, if this is, I can't live in this sort of fear anymore. How does divorce look like to you? Because I'm living in the Netherlands, and you know we've got 2 children now. We'd have to sell the boat. Like, I'm not a citizen in this country, so it's like I would have to go back to Australia, and that would mean, like, for the next 20 years, like, shipping all of our any savings that we have or anything. That means for the next 20 years, like, shipping our kids, like, to and from the Netherlands. You either come in here, me either going there. But like, in my head, I just had this, like, there's just no way, like, he has to see, you know what I mean? And it, like, when about the trauma and everything, that it's like there has to be a way to get through. Exactly. And so,
You
and that
just know deep down, don't you, that
I just knew.
if they could
Yeah.
just see
Yeah.
that, and they want to not be like their dad,
Yeah. Exactly.
right?
And
They
that was the
don't.
whole thing. Yeah, they
You
don't want to
know
be
that
like
that
that.
is not who they
Yeah,
are.
who they
It's
are.
just
And you
this
know how much pain
behavior.
that brought them. That's right. And so,
Yes.
and you don't, it came to the point where I was like, the arguments that we would have, just classic textbook arguments, And so rather than sort of engaging, if the argument would come up, I'd say, like, I feel like these are the same arguments, the stories you tell me about your dad. Like, this is playing out right here. You got to be careful how to say it, obviously, without,
Yeah.
saying that you knew anything because, he'd passed away. But just that the replications of the arguments, like they were always just about money or, what we're doing this weekend, or classic textbook marital arguments, that he also had shared with me that really hurt him growing up, And so it was
You
like how
mentioned,
to,
I think it was in the article that reading all the right books didn't protect you from the war.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
It just let you
yeah,
name the bullets.
that's right. Exactly right.
And so
Yeah,
I think there's so many women out there that have read all the stuff, right?
yeah. And
They
that's what you
understand the
think.
trauma.
Yeah,
They're getting it. They're knowing where it's
yeah,
coming from,
yeah,
but
yeah,
nothing is working in that moment
yeah.
to fix it.
And
What would
yeah,
you say to that woman who's drowning in awareness, but still
yeah.
stuck? That if you could go back and be like, this is how I did it, what would you tell
Yeah,
them?
it really is you have to have like a strong connection to yourself. So there has to be like no doubt in your mind, like what we were saying about that, you just know that this is just the response. And that really does come with like knowing who you are and knowing, that what you're feeling is correct. Like you have to have that like authentic connection, because once that's disconnected, then that's when the doubt starts coming in, the victim mentality starts coming in, and start thinking crazy thoughts.
It's interesting
But
because I just wrote a newsletter and blog post about how I used to get so sick of reading the advice that says don't take it personally,
yeah,
until I realized
don't take it
I was
personally.
taking it personally.
Yeah.
I'm
That's such a
still
big thing.
taking it
Yes, yes.
personally.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a massive thing also, because it's like none of it is personal at all. Like all of it,
Yeah.
like of course we are going to hear it as like a personal thing. Like the insults can come out as personal, but it's like when you realize like it's like, yeah, like how I
Yeah.
said,
If
like
you're
arguing with a drunk
wallowing after
person.
a fight. So how
Yeah,
I figured out that I was still taking it personally for the you
yeah,
women out there is I was still wallowing after a fight. I
yeah,
was perseverating on what was said. I
yeah,
wasn't moving on. I was
yeah,
giving him the silent treatment.
yeah, yeah,
All those things. And that's when
yeah,
I realized I am taking it personally. When you're not
absolutely.
taking it personally, you're moving on.
You're able to
You're
get on with
not
your day.
letting it
Yeah.
bother you. You're
Yeah.
going
I
out and
think
taking your kids. You're still going to
exactly.
meet your friends for dinner, even if your
Yeah. You're not
cousin is
seething over the words
no.
and
Yes,
ruminating over the
that's when
argument.
you
And
know.
yeah. Yeah. Whose fault is that really? Like,
Yeah, you're just hurting
yeah,
yourself.
you're hurting yourself. And
Yeah.
that's really the big thing, is like the connection to self, and like
Yes.
recognizing what part are you playing in this? Like what part are you playing in hurting yourself? Because
Yes.
yeah, you're doing that to yourself essentially by going over and over again. There's actually a really good I think it's like a Buddhist quote I read, but it's about the two arrows. And I'm probably going to butcher it, but essentially like the words that he says is like, imagine that he's shooting an arrow at you and the arrow misses because like you're connected to yourself, and like he's going to insult you, the arrow falls at your feet, he goes on about his day, but you pick up this arrow that he said, and you're like, like he said this, like, can you believe it? Like, and so you're damaging yourself with something that he just sort of threw your way, and then you're holding on to it, and you're the one puncturing yourself with it. So it's like you're the
That
one
is
doing it.
so true. And
Yeah,
actually, it's
yeah.
interesting because that is what one of my depictions for releasing yourself is a woman holding up a shield,
Oh
and
wow, yeah,
the guilt, the shame, the blame are just falling off your shield
falling off
and hitting the
that's
ground
right.
instead of penetrating.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
wow,
great.
that's
Who
a
knew
close
I was
one.
a
Yeah,
Buddhist monk,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, it's pretty much, a similar sort of analogy. Yeah, who knew, huh? That's
So
out in the
true.
ether. That's why you've picked that up, like
Yes,
that's all
it's
there,
there.
because it's the
It's
truth. And
there.
like the truth is always right. And that's sort of
Yeah.
with the relationship, like you just know, like I just knew that he's a smart man, and like there's just no way that, I just knew that the truth would have to sort of come to, like, and he would see it eventually, just the way I did. But I had to create that space for him to be able to, for him to be able to explore that safely, because that's what I needed. I needed to create that space in myself to be able to unpack it. And doing that
So
for
I think
myself.
if you were going back to where you knew all this stuff, but nothing was working, I think I heard you say number one was it the pause? Or
pausing and just like or the breath work or the body work, just not engaging. I'm not engaging.
Yes.
As soon as you recognize this is becoming explosive, you got to step out. You have to recognize stepping out, and you can, say that in any way, like, but just find a script. And my thing was, I'm not engaging in this. That was like, just find
I like that one.
Just find a simple sentence that you can remember and just say.
And then that's take it personally, and then
not taking
releasing yourself from it. Those are my first two steps too.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what would you say would be the third thing that you were able to do to start implementing these things?
Finding an outlet. So for me, I guess that's writing, like my notes in my phone. My writing is, what I publish is a lot clearer and a lot more eloquent than the notes that are in my phone. So like when it does happen, like it's as if like that energy is in your body, like you're still going to feel it. A good way maybe to explain it is like I saw it as like transmuting his energy. So like if we were in the house and like he was explosive, or like being like an air filter, so it's like, imagine that his anger and everything was coming out and it was like dirty air, that I could be the one to sort of cleanse the air in the house for the kids and sort of keep it calm. But you need to be able to go and like dust yourself off from that in a proper way. And for me, that was writing. So like, I would as soon as I got a moment, I had a notepad everywhere in like almost every room of the house, and my notes in my phone, and I would just like, whatever had happened, how I was feeling, how frustrating it was, like you have to still somehow get that energy out of your body, otherwise you do start like ruminating on it and thinking about the argument over and over again. But like, you've got to get it out somehow.
I completely agree.
In a healthy
when you're
way.
in survival mode and you don't give yourself time to think about what happened, what worked, what didn't work, to get quiet your mind. I mean, for me, I didn't journal as much as I should have, or write things down, but I definitely built in breathing or stretching and relaxing, where I would, that was my time to process what was going on, and also restore myself a little bit from how tiring and exhausting it was to create new patterns in my relationship.
Doing stuff for yourself was such a big one. Like I couldn't believe that I wasn't, that's the victim mentality also, was like I wasn't doing anything. And that was the point where I'm like, I was so sick of myself, because I'd spent all this time just like explaining, defending myself with these accusations and everything. And I'm like, what am I doing for myself? I don't do anything for myself. Whose fault is that though? Like I wanted to do stretching. I wanted to do, all these things, but it's like, I wasn't making the time for myself. And that victim mentality is like, you don't have time. You're a mom, like you're a stay-at-home mom. But on one of my Instagram pages during my crazy time, I filmed myself for a year doing all the housework like it's all time lapses every day. And that was where I did a lot of my venting and my writing, because one of the issues that we had was like that I'm doing nothing all day. And I believed that. So I was filming myself on time lapse, like but they became, that was my creative outlet, because I was filming, I was editing the videos at the end of the day. It was me like with the kids washing the windows or doing the vacuuming, like, but I started the journaling. So I was like, it moved from like just the housework to be like, you know what, I'm gonna do the journaling. Because that was another thing where I thought I was just looking for a fast, like quick fix, and I feel like a lot of people are looking for that with anything in their life, like, and you think that you can beat it by finding this quick fix, like, oh, I'm not going to journal, I'm not going to stretch, I'm a breath work, like I need something now, like you don't understand how hard it is, like, but those things really are what works.
I listened to Matthew McConaughey was on Jay Shetty. They just did I think it was like an Instagram live one time.
Yeah.
And I was in the middle of writing my book, where I was trying to figure out how did I get through all this, just like, you writing that. And he was saying Matthew McConaughey is a big journaler.
Yeah.
And
I
his
saw he's just
reflection,
put out a journal. Yeah.
yeah. And his big reflection was, it's so interesting how we journal when everything is going well, but we don't journal when we really need it. And that's when things aren't going well.
Yeah.
And
that's
that
true.
just absolutely resonated with me. And that's exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you've got
those
to
are the things you push on the back
yeah.
burner when you're in survival mode that actually you need to push forward and make a priority. Well, thank you so much for getting on, because our story, we want to make it something that people talk about, because this is really going on in our relationships.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. And the more we can talk about it, the more we can get to the root of what's really going on, and how we can both work on it to make it better, because we all deserve, despite what happened to us in the past,
absolutely
healthy, we deserve love.
Exactly. And it's no way to live, like, living this, carrying the emotional weight or thinking that you have to be a certain way. Like, you got to find a way to, be your true authentic self, and that's where love is really going to flourish. And especially when you have children, which, you don't want to pass down, like, to use another sort of bomb analogy or grenade analogy, like families are just like passing down like this hand grenade, and they're like, oh, hot potato sort of thing, like passing it off to the next generation, hoping it doesn't go off with them. But it's like someone has to be like, hey, how about I just sort of deactivate this thing and like set it aside. I don't want to pass this down to my kids like a crusty old family heirloom. You want something, you want to hand down patterns, and that's something that's like one of the best gifts that you can give your kids also, isn't it?
Thank you so much for today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, that was amazing. I could have literally talked to Emily for hours. I absolutely loved her honesty, the way that she's grown, and she was able to describe it in such detail, and the way she's just slowly peeling off that emotional bond suit, not just for herself, but for her kids. It's so powerful. And if you're still here, I know that you feel it too. So here's the real deal. The 3 things I want you to walk away with. Number 1, knowing the trauma isn't enough. You can read all the books, highlight every quote, listen to every podcast, but awareness without action, it just keeps you stuck. And so it wasn't until Emily started doing the hard things, therapy, body work, boundaries, that real change began to happen. And those are the same steps I had to figure out the hard way in my marriage too. Number 2, I want you to take away that silence is inherited. I mean, that moment when Emily realized her son wasn't speaking up because she hadn't been, oh, that one really hit me in the gut, because we think we're keeping the peace, But sometimes we're unintentionally teaching our kids to shrink. And the cycle really stops when we can start using our voice and looking towards our internal things that we can change. And number 3, boundaries aren't rejection, they're repair. So things like saying, I'm not engaging in this might feel really scary at first, but it's not about shutting your partner down. It's about creating that emotional safety for you and your family. And I really want you all to hear this. I want to say this aloud for anyone who needs to hear it. Emily said it best. She said, it's a blueprint. It's not who you are. The trauma responses, the shutdowns, the people pleasing, the explosive reactions, they're patterns, not your identity and not your destiny. And that is why I am so grateful that we're telling these stories, because this isn't about shame or blame. It's about shifting the mindset from I'm doing it all wrong to I was doing the only thing I knew to do at the time. But now you can learn a new way. So if this episode landed with you, I want you to share it. Please tag a friend who needs to know she's not crazy for feeling like this. And if you're feeling like you're ready to take some of these first steps that Emily and I were talking about, I want you to reach out, book a call. You don't have to keep doing this alone. So until next time, keep going, keep growing, and remember, your healing doesn't just change your life, it changes your legacy. We'll see you next time.
All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, the real deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.